Happy New Year to everybody out here. And of course, welcome to today's webinar, the first one for the year 2025. And today will be our 97th, if I'm right. Yeah, my counting is okay. 97th session or webinar since we started as Areopa webinars back in 2019. Today I have two guests, Arthur van der Vondervoort and Stefan Maron, who were very willing to do this presentation. Why should I use a custom code analyzer? Well, I leave a lot to them to introduce themselves, but a little bit detail here. I think this is a very important topic. You might not be the one building your own custom code analyzer, but as you might know, Stefan has built one, the BC LinterCop, and Arthur is one of the guys who stepped in to collaborate with Stefan to make that thing even more, covering things that help us writing code in AL. So, welcome guys. Before I'm going to hand over to you, I'm like always going through a couple of slides for those that are new, especially the housekeeping rules. You might have seen that your microphone is muted as attendee. We're not going to unmute it, but we're going to invite you to use the questions window to post questions. Feel free to step in with any question coming around. In that sense, interact with us, me as the moderator, but more important with the speakers. And I will pick up your questions. My name, by the way, is Luc van Vugt. You might know me. Fortunately, I'm not moderating every session anymore, and not that I dislike it, but I'm very happy that there are many more that stepped in to help moderate those sessions, making it sure that this, Areopa webinar story will continue in the future. This is recorded. If you didn't know yet, we're putting it on Areopa webinars channel on YouTube, probably this evening again for today's webinar. This is a screenshot from our site page where you can find all the recordings with the link on this slide to the Areopa webinars channel. If you're not yet subscribed to our newsletter, use this URL. You can find it on our website too, to get every time we send out a newsletter, get it in your mailbox. And before I'm going to hand over to the speakers of today, this is what it's ahead. There's always new things coming around. Today I sent out a new newsletter, including the last two new sessions on this list, the one from Tina Staric and Søren Friis Alexandersen. We're working continuously on any new one. As you can see, there's a gap between February 17 and March 17 because on March 3 there is already something in our schedule, but not fully confirmed yet. But keep an eye on our website on the newsletter. So if you want to be a speaker, if you have topics, help us. Come up, propose something. There is always going to be new speakers like Stefan and Arthur today on Areopa webinars. But like you see on January, we will have Bartosz, a new speaker. On February 3rd, Christian Lenz, a new speaker. On March 17th, Søren Friis Andersen, also a new speaker. That doesn't say that they're new as speakers, but in Areopa webinars history, they will be there for the first time. And if you want to, and if you are a bit reluctant to do it, you're not sure if you can do it, feel free to contact me. I've been coaching various speakers in the past already, and I'm very happy to let you step into the world of presenting and make it a good experience. Now it's time to go hand over, and before I do, I want to thank Fornaf enabling us to send out, to broadcast our webinars. So, as agreed, I'm going to make you presenter, Arthur, and you know what to do.
All right, let me start. My name is Stefan, and thank you, Luc, for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak here as well, of course. And our topic today is why should I use a custom code analyzer? My name is, again, Stefan Maron, as said. I'm currently a freelance BC developer, so I'm working on several projects, like all sorts of things. I am like, what is it now? 6 months MVP already, or not even, not sure, lost track. You might know me because of the code history repository. I think it's, today I saw something like 366 stars. So I think it's become quite popular. And then also, of course, the LinterCop, today's topic of the session. And I hope that we can give you some ideas of what we do and how we did it, especially, and maybe how you can do it yourself.
Yes, introduce also myself. My name is van Vondervoort. I work at Varoy here in Belgium, where I'm a few years already into Business Central and previous MEV. It's already, I think, 14 years already passed. Most of my daily time I'm working with Business Central, but also like the other projects. I'm quite passionate about DevOps, but also the other project that Stefan already mentioned a little bit, the LinterCop. That was a project where I was quite enthusiastic about. And that's also a project where I get to know Stefan. I started a little bit of the project to help him with it. And then I think it was Tech Days in Antwerp, where also met Stefan. And we get more and more in touch. And today we're even presenting a webinar together. First off, let's start with a warning. What we're going to see can possibly break, because it's today not officially supported by Microsoft to create your own code analyzers. They know we have the LinterCop and they're quite fine with it, but the problem is they cannot support it officially. What do I mean by that? Like in the AL language, we have things that can be marked as obsolete. That will be changed in the future. As of today, that's not a thing in a code analyzer. And today, I also believe that's even a positive thing, because if Microsoft would also have to take in place that they have to obsolete things before we can move things in the code analyzers, that will slow down their development. While the other side, we create a custom code analyzer, can quite easily catch those breaking stuff with our pipelines and with some compiler directives. It's quite easy to handle on that. So I think that's quite okay as today. In the future, they may be going to support it, but as today, I don't think that should be a reason to not start or wait on it. Okay, let's jump into the agenda of today. We're going to talk a bit on the why question. Why should I use a custom code analyzer? We're going to also look at the open source project. We're also going to dive a little bit deeper into what is code analysis. And we're also going to show you how you can build your own code analyzer to help you. And as last, also the integration on DevOps in the story. Also, there is a place for that for custom code analyzers. Before we start in that, the first question is the why question. Why should we use a custom code analyzer? I think Stefan can quite helpful explain that a little bit to us.
Yeah, thanks. Why? Simply because, just to put it in one sentence, you want to have you want to catch as many bugs as possible, right? So any code analyzer that can be added on top will give you more to analyze and more warnings which you can react on. So this is basically the answer of this question in one sentence. And if I want to elaborate this a little bit further, if we look at the best practices we have described, or the list of best practices we can possibly think of, like we can do training and educations of developer, we can do test-driven developments, we can have like GitHub and Azure DevOps as source control management, alongside with pipelines, the whole DevOps cycle basically. Then the and Arthur, you need to help me with that abbreviation because I always forget what it means. DTAP.
Development, test, acceptance, and production. That's mostly your development suite. They're not just does not publish everything direct in production. That's not a best practice.
Exactly. You don't want to do that anymore. So thanks. This you might be all doing, hopefully. And then again, pipelines already mentioned, code reviews also in place, and then what possibly to add more to this, or how much is there even left on, like how many issues are even left after you do all of those things to be catched by a custom code analyzer, right? So is there even a margin left that we can improve even further by implementing this code analyzer? And you might recognize this chart, maybe not this one exactly, but the idea of this chart is it describes how expensive is a bug if you catch it, or if you don't catch it early enough, how expensive does it get to fix it and to get back to normal working routine. So if we are talking production post-release, it's very expensive because there might be a cost involved to even identify the bug, find it about it, then fix it, and maybe the bug already caused some issues in the data which you need to correct afterwards. And you might need to figure out which customers are even experiencing this issue. So there is like a whole list of things you need to care about. But as further, if you move forward in the chain of development, like system acceptance testing, then maybe integration testing, even coding or requirements architecture, it gets less and less expensive because there isn't so much to fix, to care about. When we're talking about requirements documents, you basically just rewrite a paragraph in a document at best, and then you're done. Then you fix that bug, if you want to call it bug at that stage even. And we are with the custom code analyzers, we are targeting at the coding section of the cycle. So the custom code analyzers can help you to identify issues while coding. We do not have custom code analyzers or analyzers for requirements documents. That would be really awesome, but we can do coding, and that's pretty easy actually to do. You will see that later. And then when coding, you're typing in the code and you get the warning directly. I mean, we all probably know how the analyzers look like, but that way with the custom code analyzers, you can even automate things, for example, from the code review that might be specific to your company, and just automate them. So while writing code, every developer would see the issue directly and can react upon it without losing any traction during the development.
Let's start some deeper. Before we dive into the LinterCop and then show you the code analysis, let's do a little step backwards and take an overview what we're talking about if we're talking about code analysis. If we look at code analysis, I see two major possibilities. You can do a static code analysis or a dynamic code analysis. Difference between those both here is if I talk to the blue one, the right one, dynamic, that is analyzing your code in the Business Central application itself. So, for example, an environment, it could be a Docker environment or a sandbox. And if I want to analyze my code, does it behave as the way as expected? I maybe have a test suite with a test app and publishing that app and running my tests. Or maybe I have a page scripting I have like a fire on and see the results of that. Or maybe there's a manual user acceptance testing going and they will provide feedback. Again, does the code that I created behave the way as I would expect it? If I jump over to the other one, to the left side, that is more static code analysis. That helps in VS Code itself. So during development, it already will review your code. But the main difference is the code, VS Code, will not be executed. It will only look at the code, interpret the code, and do a review on that code. So see it more as a code reviewer. That will also, in a code review, look at your code, maybe not really have your code running, but look at it and see if I see code smells or stuff going on that or doesn't follow a pattern. So that's more the static part of it. It's important to know the difference between those two worlds. There is a little bit of overlap sometimes in the middle, but static code analyzers behave different and have different strengths or weaknesses. If I jump into that, and the dynamic way of code analyzing, and I personally on the static one, what I really like is I have got 100% code coverage. Every line of code that I during development, as code analyzer, I can quite easily review that line of code and see if there is something that I could improve on that. Where in the dynamic one, creating your tests, it's quite hard to get 100% code coverage. Not impossible, but maybe even not even the best practice to target on that. It brings us again on the left side, on the static part, that we don't need specific to write tests for my static code analyzer. Like again, during development, it already analyze my code and provide me feedback on that. And what I also like on the static one is it reports the exact location where it finds a defect, maybe a bug or improvement. So exact line of code and maybe even the position inside the code. It will highlight, for example, a method or a function that says that I've analyzed the code and maybe there is a defect or a problem here. Where in the dynamic part, if I jump over to the right side, if, for example, I have a test suite and I run my test suite, I get feedback that tests were successful or failure, but I have no source control at that point of time. I can only see my test has failed. Then I have to dive in, maybe do some debugging to find my line of code, what is responsible for why my test failed. So there's a little bit more time handling on that side, on the dynamic part. Does it not mean we can throw out our tests and jump over to static code analyzers all the way? That's not going to work, because sometimes we need to run this code in runtime. For example, reading and writing data to the database. That's quite hard, nearly impossible to do from a static code analyzer perspective. But also things like record refs, variants, all that thing that are populated in runtime that are quite hard. And like I said, nearly impossible to do a static code analyze. So the dynamic and static part, they are both complementary to each other and go hand in hand to help you during your development. And it's time maybe we see a demo on that. Let me open up my VS Code. I have here a small sample app. I have a basic app, and I will show you what we can achieve on static code analyze. In my settings, I already have the code analyzer activated. The tree comes with a product out of the box, the code company UI cop. In this case, it was per tenant, so I did a PTA cop. If you're not using these already, one of those three, I would highly recommend to start using them. They are great and will help you already if you set those up. Let me talk you through real quickly to the app. Here's a small idea. I have an officer app with an officer table for an officer type, and the pattern you mostly will recognize as a code and description field in here. It of course has a list page that will show this, and you will see already some strange things coming on. As a code reviewer, I will maybe look a bit harsh on this, seeing this, and that's not really the code I would like to see. And some other stuff are in. I have a contact table. It has an officer type, so I can get an officer type assigned to a contact. My customer table has an extra field where I can mark it's a premium customer or not. Of course, my app comes with a permission set. It comes with a code unit where I can update my contacts with a new officer code. And there is some code here to help that. The working of the app is not really important. It's more that I have my app today. I can build the app. App is completely successful. I have 0 problems, so I could ship this into an acceptance environment, and the testing could start on this. Only there are quite some few bugs and some code smells in the example we've provided here. What I would recommend is in the extension marketplace, if you search for LinterCop, there is an extension Stefan has created. That's quite helpful to get you starting on using a custom code analyzer. In this case, the Business Central LinterCop. You can search for this and quite easily install this extension. I've already installed it here, so I can skip this step here. And what you would then get here at the bottom, you have an option to see what code cops are active. And if I click on this, I can easily deselect some extra code analyzers. So I can now activate Business Central LinterCop. And as you can see here, I have now 45 extra problems, warnings that have now occurred because there are some things wrong in the code I have. Let's take a few examples of these. Let's start easy. Let's start with the list page. You see there are quite some warnings on the casing. The wrong casing is detected. There's always a preference for every developer. Do I do uppercase, lowercase, camel casing? That's something I think you should discuss with your team. What is our style we want to do? The code analyzer can help you on that. to provide the thing what is normally what's expected. Because if I look at the IntelliSense, it should be upper camel casing. And that will help you to already set those strange lines of code here to help you improve on that. It could be that you have a large extension that was built through the years in the vision, and you said, if I'm going to have to rework this costs a lot of effort. So you can always decide on what rules do I think is important we as a team want to commit on or not. So in my settings, I also have a custom rule set defined. And in those rules, I can determine what I want to have the rules, what the default severity should be. For example, this was the casing part. If I want to skip that, say I'm not going to work on this for this project, for example, I can switch selection to none. And now you see from the 40 problems have now been resolved and other warnings are still there. There's just maybe some more important stuff. For example, a caption property is missing here. That's already something you can work on. And also some tooltips is also now more readable as an info here. You can determine what you want as the tooltips. Sorry, you want as the rules what to show on. For those tooltips, for example, if you read this and said, why should a tooltip start with the word specifies? Is that something where does this come from? There's also a link here you can always click on. It will then open up the wiki with some documentation on why is it here. And the Microsoft user system model says on field controls, it should start with the word specifies. That are the guidelines for tooltips, and it's here also read here. So that's for most of the rules, we have documentation also written on why the rule is there, what should it help, or why should it show a rule. For example, this one, starting with specify. Let's start a few other ones. If I have a table extension for the contact with a new field, it now shows a rule that the ID and name or type has a conflict. If I set this file next to it, you see at the customer, I also have a same field number that I've used for extending the customer table. And in the app, there is, in the base app for Business Central, there's functionality. If you have a contact, you can then, as a user, click on an action that says create a customer from this contact. And then the application will try to get the officer type, that is a code 20 field, mapped it over to a Boolean. That's not going to work, and the user will get a nice little runtime error. And this are for examples we can already see during development that before we can move on, I have to fix this, because if I release this will guarantee will get a runtime error in the application. So I don't have to have tests or wait for the user to run these tests. I already should do in development. I can see I have a problem here. I need to resolve this before I can move on. A few other examples. The permission set was quite easy. But also here, there could be a caveat that the caption should not be longer than 30 characters. There's a limit on that. My example is below that limit. But if there is a translation added, it could be that the string of the translation is longer. But then again, you could get in trouble in the application itself because it can't handle captions longer than 30 characters. So I should again set a max limit, a max length, or I should lock this caption. Here are also a few things. Sorry, my table. It will show me that I missed some properties to set, the lookup and drill down. Both best practice to set them both and only have to look up, not to drill down. And even the lookup page ID, maybe did a copy paste for something else, but I copied the wrong property because this list page is not off for the type officer type table. And here's a really important one for the code and description fields. You could get in trouble if you release it like this. The customer can then create an officer type with an empty code field. The downside of that is if the user creates one of a record, all your contacts, it has that officer type mapped, but then all the contacts will receive that empty officer type you created. And if you then, for example, rename that, all your customers that had no officer type assigned to them will get that new renamed assignment to that. And it does strange situations you find yourself in then can easily be resolved to setting a property explicitly to have that set to not blank. Okay, last one, a few of them. I'm not going to handle all of them, a few of them here. I believe you don't should use lock table anymore. You have now the read isolation property, and probably you want to set it to update lock. Set filter with an operator is not going to do what you would expect from this one. Also fun part, if you set autocog fields on a field that isn't a type of a blob or a flow field, it will also again get in runtime throw you an error message on that. And so a few of them here. If I do a modify, also there, the default is to have the trigger, default is to have the run trigger set to false. You also have a rule to set that explicitly, because my future self in like a year or something, do I still remember, did I not want to execute that code in no modify trigger, or do I forgot to set that property here? So we have a rule in place that we want to explicitly set it to true or false and not leave it blank. And the same goes a little bit for a commit. If you need a commit, it's quite, you need to justify why it's there, because it's quite uncommon to use that. And also your future self in like a year or maybe 2 years, if you look back at this code, it's maybe quite hard to remember why did I place a comment here, what problem did I try to solve here. So also that needs a comment to set it to where it's there. It helps also the code reviewer, because if I'm a code reviewer and I get this code, my first question would be, why is there a comment here? So the code analyzer already helps to help you to set the question there. So you can provide a comment on this one before creating a pull request. That was in a nutshell some of the rules we have in the LinterCop. And this gives you maybe an idea to show on what can help do code analyzing during development, what rules we have a little bit, we've touched on now, and what we have the VS Code we can display with you on. So I'm going to hand it over again back to Stefan to talk a little bit more on what you've seen now, the LinterCop part on it.
Thanks. Yeah, the LinterCop. I want to talk a little bit about the initiative, about the project, and give a little bit background about the LinterCop in general, and why I think part of why it ended up where it is today. It all started basically. The idea came based on this output, and this is the most recent, like a more recent screenshot, but it was all like that way all the time. And this is a screenshot from a build pipeline output. So in the build pipelines, you see the entire log of all the commands that get executed, and this particular was the alc-exe. So this is the compiler command, which actually compiles your app. And I realized that there is one parameter called Analyser, which defines the DLLs basically, which are responsible for creating the warnings, as I found out after I investigated a little bit. But what was very interesting about this was that it's just a listing of analyzers because the parameter is always the same. So I wondered, couldn't we just add one ourselves, like one additional one, because it seems to be something dynamic? And it turned out after some decompiling and a few longer nights of investigating that it actually is opened up the interfaces in C# and everything you need to be able to add this stuff. It wasn't private, or it is not private. It was never private, as it seems. So I started to copy and paste, and like with my limited knowledge of C#, build something to try out to write some rules, right? And the first rule that was born was the a rule to analyze whether your flow fields are editable or not, and they shouldn't be usually. And so this was the entire use code for this. So there is a little bit of boilerplate code before and after this part, but it's basically always the same. And the code that you see here is basically all there is. And I mean, I didn't have a debugger back then. I didn't know how to debug this, especially not in VS Code. So the code is as it looks as it looks, but it did get the job done, and the proof of concept was done. And this was back in September in 2021. So now we hit what is it, 3.5 years. And as of today, the same rule was reduced to 4 lines basically, and one being the obsolete check. So you could probably shrink this down to a 2-line or something to actually give this warning to the user. So arguably, it's pretty easy once you know what you're doing. Of course, it's pretty straightforward to write those kind of rules, especially if it's rather easy. And at the bottom, you can see the history of that, the timeline of that file. So as you can see, like 2 years ago, I did my last change on this, and then basically the community took over, mostly Arthur, of course, but also others, and improving this. So we got a few things down the line. We got the debugger working. We got automated tests and stuff working, but I would never be able to do this without the community. And you can see this on the timeline here, basically. The contributors, and this is the slide still from November from EMEA, so we could be at more contributors by now. If I forgot anyone, I'm sorry about that, but just go to the repository. You can see that easily. You can, all the contributors are listed there for sure. And then as of November, we had 1.6 million downloads, 30,000 on the latest version. So there is quite a heavy usage on the LinterCop already. We had in November 70 rules. Now we have 74 live. I checked this just before that, and we are at 86 rules, including the ones that are currently in pre-release and beta for testing. And again, as I said before, we got the debugger working. I don't remember. I don't think I figured this out. Probably was a contribution. The automated tests for rules was absolutely a contribution. So that's super crazy stuff. Super nice to have. And then also pipelines. Thanks to Arthur, we do quite heavy pipelining with the automated tests and everything. So it really, again, a shout out to anyone who is helping on this, and then also a reminder for anyone who doesn't or haven't had a chance to look at open source projects yet. It's really awesome that you can get help basically for free with your own project just because you're building this out in the public. So if there is any option also for company things, if you can't monetize it, make it open source. It's just gonna be better at the end, really. Can't get tired to emphasize this. So yeah, that is the LinterCop today, and I think we just talked before the session. It's probably not too much to say that we're gonna hit 100 rules this year with the LinterCop. So there is absolutely no end in sight. There are so many ideas out that are still waiting to be built, and every day there are new ideas coming over. So yeah, there's a tremendous amount of traction. All right, let's continue with some examples of the rules. I mean, we have seen some in the demo, but we've prepared some more slides with examples of what rules we can do. So if you can click on the next, because, oh yeah, I'm always lost because even myself, I know the number, the name of the rule and everything, and during a code review, I could easily overlook this. That's why it's so important to have the analyzers running during development. auto increment does not work on table types temporary because the table schema is not synchronized to the database, so the database cannot automatically increment your entry number. It's easy as that, but it's so easy to overlook. So perfect example. Again, every time I'm missing that.
Absolutely. I have another example, more of an adoption on new features. This method to get a password will work perfectly. I think there's a better way to resolve this. So we also have a line in LinterCop, a rule that will help you to say update the new secret text variable that is possible, instead of using a normal text field and have it a property of a decorator non-debuggable. I think this is a better approach on this, because now you can also remove that non-debuggable decorator, so you can debug the code if there is somewhere is a problem without exposing the password in this example, because it's a secret text and that is shielded during development. Just for passwords, tokens, all credentials, I think you should update the secret text part on this.
Time to market. So we have a rule in there which now I'm not seeing. Yeah, exactly. I was missing, like, did we have like the property in there? A rule in place which will remind you to put in extensible or accessible properties on object level. And the idea is to give you the opportunity to push objects to app source without deciding on the outside interface, like the signature of the object. So basically, with those properties set to false or internal for extensible, if you set them to internally, basically allows you to do breaking changes. That way you can push those objects to app source, but still change them and like release quicker, and then decide on the interface, or like create a dedicated interface objects for like if we're talking code units or something. And again, similar to the not blank property, it's or the modify false true, the parameter. It's like a reminder to set those properties explicitly, because otherwise you could forget and use the implicit value, which is that everything's open, and therefore breaking changes if you want to modify them afterwards.
Unifying the code. I have here a simple API page that will give the consumer of this API page all the customer numbers and their name. But as I go to here, I don't like this. What is going on here? If you create an API, I believe you always should have the vision that the one who's going to consume your API doesn't know the internal workings of Business Central. So it could ask, have a field no, is also a field yes. And why does the field no doesn't return a Boolean, but the code string text? So I think you can improve this. We have some rules in place that will require you, for example, to implement mandatory fields. And I believe the system ID should always be mandatory on almost every API page. And that also helps if you integrate with an external party. That's quite fun if you do the customer number, where in this example also I believe you should call the field number and not field NO. It's quite hard to explain to them that a user can change the customer number. If they do an integration on them, that's quite difficult to then explain that the number isn't immutable and the customer has received a new number. So that could get you in quite some funny situations. So I believe you have to also have the ID, the number, and for name I tend to use the display name as property. And the last part, I believe modified datetime also should be there. If you're working, for example, with Power Automate, you have a flow that has connected to the, if a customer has changed or created, modify on a customer table. If you modify a lot of records in a short time of window, the webhook functionality below will then get you into trouble if that field isn't there. Then your Power Automate will not work as you would expect it to be. On the other, and also I think the consumer again of your API would be possible for them to ask, can I get all the customers that have been modified for the last week? So there's also fields that I think mandatory should also be on every API page. We have one last one, I believe. I think we overtouched that one already. Don't forget the defaults in there. So I think we're going to skip this one.
All right, so I've been working on this project, like more repository. It's not really a project. And before I have tried to explain this in detail. If you try it out, if you run into any issues, it doesn't work for you, whatever, leave an issue. I try to fix it or describe it better, whatever, try to help. And the idea of this is to give you the opportunity to use this template to create your own custom code analyzer. And I've prepared this already here for a demo. So let's just go ahead and create this. And I wanted to do this live on stream or in this session to give you an idea of how long this actually takes. So first thing is to create the repository from the template, and then it's pretty much plug and play. If you want to use the custom code cup name for your custom code cup, you can skip this entire renaming step. If you want to rename it, you can just follow this description here. We are not going to rename this right now, but apart from that, you can pretty much just use it as it is. And as you can see, it's already running pipelines for you. It's just spinning up the versions to compile them, all of them, and it will come back in a minute. It will create a draft release for you right away. And in the meantime, we're going to start a code space. If you haven't used code spaces so far, they're pretty much pre-configurable templates of development environments, not just VS Code, but also the machine underneath. This runs on Linux, but you shouldn't really notice anything, so don't be afraid. And if I click this button, it will just open VS Code in the browser, and it will clone the repository for me and load everything up. And then if we go back to the description, it will start the code space. We need to wait a few seconds till everything's loaded, and then we can use F1 to start run a task which is called prep code space, which is basically just a PowerShell script which will create an AL project for you in the background and download dependencies and like do some preparational steps. And I hope we should be there any minute. Maybe in the meantime, or I realized this is still in dark mode, so I hope you can see it. But basically, oh, this is the template. Sorry. Here we go. So the initial commit is already finished. There are a few warnings about versions, but that is not really anything to worry about. Important is that we got our first code analyzer already running. So if you go to releases, you can see there is the custom code cup AL DLL per AL language version back to version 12. So you can already start developing with this. You can use this in VS Code already as it is right now. There is just one demo rule inside. Now we are there, so I can actually show you the rule. So this is basically just a diagnostics, and there, as I said, there is a little bit of boilerplate code, and I'll leave it to you to read through this and try to understand what is going on. But in the bottom, you have some descriptions basically, and you can take it from here and just modify them as you need them. There are some triggers at the top on when this analyzer, on which code, basically on which AL code this is executed, and then you have the use code, and you can see this is the flow field editable rule. I just changed I took this example and just changed it a little bit, so it creates this one. This is what we want to see. Now let's run the task. It's just run tasks and then low prep code space, and this will just take a few seconds. It will basically go ahead and run this PowerShell script, which will run another PowerShell script, which will download the AI language. So it will use the VS Code Marketplace API and download the extension, extract it, and use save what we need as a dependency to be able to develop. And then it will just create an app.json file, a test.al file, and a settings file, and then we can go ahead and compile and open this in a moment. So there are just a few things I wanted to get automated, because then it's just easier and you don't need to care too much about how this all works, basically. So that was the downloading part. Now we can use run task again and say build. This will compile and will open up a second tab in the browser with the debug project. And yeah, this is VS Code Web. And then we got those two pages. And basically, this is the error message or the warning we just got, we just saw in the C# code part. And now if I want to debug this, I can, I think it just, is it F5? Yeah, it's F5. So we need to, we are debugging a DLL. This means we are not running the DLL directly, but we need to attach to the process that's using the DLL, which is basically the Dynamics language server. And you can just use search for Dynamics like this and select it. And now if we put in the breakpoint in here, and we need to re-trigger the code analysis, which is triggered if we edit the file, it should break in here, and then you have the debugger open with all the context variables, and they can really, you need to explore this yourself, because it's way too much properties that are on those different types. Basically, every type has different properties, but we can see the field ID, for example. We can probably also see the field name somewhere. We can see parents, we can see also the entire language tree, basically. It's really complex, but once you get used to it a little bit more, then it's not too bad. And you have lots of examples in the LinterCop to get started. But yeah, what I wanted to show is that with this template project, it should be really easy for everyone to get started. And let me just switch back to my slides here. There we go. Yeah, this was the demo. The idea is, with why I'm showing this to you is, the LinterCop has many rules already, but for the LinterCop, since it's targeted at the broader audience, we need to be sure that the rules are really working in all scenarios as a first priority, and then also make sure that those are somewhat, if they are not as straightforward, you might want to have them as not visible by default, and then people that need to use them or want to use them can turn them on. We need to consider that broader audience. If you're writing a code cop for your own code reviews, like company inside code cop, code analyzer, then you can maybe do a little bit things like more quick and dirty, more hard coded, just easier. And then looking at this tweet, this was actually a nice idea for a rule, which is probably pretty easy to write, that field and variable names should not include a percentage or an ampersand symbol, because that might break Excel or Rapid Start. So things like this, just think about your code reviews and think about what things you might be able to automate in your company, and then just start developing and automate those things. All right, DevOps.
We've now seen VS Code, LinterCop and custom code analysis. I'm a believer that also has to be implemented in your DevOps solution. For Business Central, for AL development, there are quite some multiple solutions out there. I've listened to a few of them here. The good part that I know of, the good news that I can bring, is that all the solutions that I know of have support for custom code analyzers, and most of them also have out-of-the-box support for the LinterCop. So if you're using a solution out there, you're not having LinterCop implemented today in your DevOps solution, I would highly recommend it to do. The reason on that is if I would create a pull request, I think it's important what we did in our company. I have an example on that on the slides next to this. Is that if I create a pull request, our CI/CD pipeline would show. And we have a few steps in it, and it starts with the build process. Normally then the automated tests will be run, and if both of them are green, then a code reviewer jumps in and will do a code review for the pull request. And if it's okay, he'll do a sign off or maybe have some feedback on it. What is a code reviewer? What I think is important, I want to know if all those rules we have in place, they're all okay and there are no warnings left anymore. What we did in our company is every warning we have in a solution, we will have to build failed, and we won't even start running the tests. We believe that we should have a solution without any warnings. There are test runs, and if our automated testers are all green, then the code reviewer will jump in, and most of the simple things that are already there have been handled by the code analyzers, so that the code reviewer can focus on the important stuff like design patterns and more that kind of area to have a code review in. What's important here, I believe, is how you handle the rule sets, because it's quite annoying if you have in VS Code everything okay and no warnings, and you check in your DevOps solution, and then it throws warnings or something. That's not how it should be. Of course, VS Code should have the same rules to play with as your CI/CD or DevOps solution. So what we did is we create a rule set. We have multiple rule sets. We have a base one. Rule sets we as a team all agreed on. We want to confirm on these rules. So we have a base one, and then for the tenant extension or app source, we have some additional rules on that. And what we did is we have VS Code and as a DevOps look at the same file on that. You could quite easily have, for example, here in as a storage, but also you could have it on GitHub or any cloud storage. And with the feature Microsoft has on it in the include rule sets you can use in your solution, you can point that to a URL, and that's what we did. So all our projects will point to our company rule set. So if we take on new rules or want to change rules, it will automatically have for multiple projects and multiple solutions you work on, will update those new rules. And our CS DevOps system and VS Code on the laptop or in the code space of the developer will also show the same rules on it.
One last thing before we wrap up, I think. This was actually something on EMEA. It was funnier because I came up with this during the preparation for the session on the last day. So yeah, it was quite something I wanted to fit in last minute. I came up with the idea to use or misuse, if you want so, the Analyser engine for analysis of the code, but not as like give me warnings if something's wrong, but give me like extract information about, in this case, the base app. And what I did was I wrote a warning, just a simple thing, and you can check my GitHub, I have it on there, to extract usages of transfer fields and basically end up with a list of combinations of tables that are used with that transfer fields is used for. So in this case, the idea was to eventually end up having the rule for warnings. We saw that earlier with the field IDs, draw from a file like this generated by another rule, maybe through pipelines, whatever. But you can also, like, if you're interested in some statistics or if something's used in the base app, you can just, well, but you can write an analyzer for this, a rule, which will then, you can just run against the base application or any extension you have the code of and extract information that way. So it's maybe like In some cases, regex would just work, but in this case, I actually get the table IDs and the exact table names unrelated to the variable names used, because I can the compiler gives me that information. And the interesting thing is there are like about 420 combinations of tables that are used with transfer fields in the base app. And I was shocked by this number. I thought like maybe a couple, like 100, 150 combinations, maybe. No, it's 420 combinations. So yeah, just another thing, like think out of the box a little bit. This is a really powerful tool for all sorts of use cases, basically. And yeah, so the recap, just to wrap everything up, we are at the top of the hour, I know, but it's the LinterCop is the open source project basically for the very first one to do custom code analyzers, but I know there are a few other ones and a few like internal projects that already adopted this. You can implement it into DevOps without any issues. With the template that I created, you should be able to really get up to speed quickly, at least for the organizational stuff. You still need to get used to writing analyzer rules, but all the boilerplating around it shouldn't be an issue. Use the code spaces. It's a really great thing. You can also use it locally, of course, but then you need to care about you need to have .NET installed and stuff like this. The code spaces will handle that for you. It's just a plug and play thing. Remember to start small, pick some easy rules, maybe just some naming conventions, maybe just some, like I said, the special characters and field names, something like this. And then get inspired by the LinterCop. Check it out, have a look at the rules, copy whatever you need to copy. It's open source, you can reuse anything in there, doesn't matter. And if you end up writing any rules that might be a suitable contribution, just put it in there. Create a pull request, Arthur and I and the community around it will probably help you get there if you have questions, just to finish this off, and let's make it better together.
Absolutely. I have a small remark, a small additional that if you see LinterCop and you're not really a developer but you want to contribute, also know there's a discussion board on the LinterCop. So if you have a pull request as a code reviewer or had a good idea, also feel free to provide ideas that we could discuss on, and maybe it will pick up somebody and will eventually get a new rule for the LinterCop. So you could also contribute by providing ideas or in that kind of area.
Or just give your opinions to the existing discussions. Also, always highly appreciated.
Yeah, that's really helpful because sometimes you're struggling a little bit. Does this rule cover everything? Do I need to think of exceptions? So it's quite helpful if you join us in a discussion board. Absolutely.
I don't think we have any time for Q&A, but I think
and there are no questions, so that
yeah,
aligns very well. I think it was very clear, so that's why you didn't. There are no questions listed. So I would say thank you very much, guys. I have one question myself, though. I'm interested. As you and your what if to extract statistical information. I'm also interested in statistical information on your project. Have you seen any more traction getting on your project let's say over the last years? Has the community got more involved in your LinterCop project the last year?
absolutely. I mean, I think the bigger contributions were all within. Arthur, you need to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maybe the last year, maybe the last like 18 months, where we had the contributions of automated tests for the linter rules themselves, and then also a number of rules also written by contributors outside of us too. So yeah, it's a curve. It's going up. So
great, good to know. Yeah, because that will work like what do you call it? A machine that's going to run faster and faster. I changed the screen already to round up, thank you very much, guys, for this story. Thanks everybody for joining in. You got a couple of compliments from James Pearson, from Michael Nielsen, and Job Louache. Thank you very much for being here, Stefan and Arthur. And well, Arthur, we'll see you in a couple of weeks again, together with Tobias Fencer. And well, I hope to see you somewhere else soon also. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Have a great remaining part of the day, and hope to see you on our next session in 2 weeks' time. That will be the session by Bartosz, and be welcome to join in. Thank you.